Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are very excited to be talking to you about the 1984. Was it 1984?
82.
1982. So it's a futuristic film. We are very excited to be talking to you about the 1982 feature, Class of 1984.
Class of 1984.
Take a look at my face. I am the future. How do you like what you see? Take a look at my face. I belong to the future.
Class of 1984. Their only goal is power.
I run this school, man.
Their only law is survival.
If you want to survive around here, you have got to learn to look the other way.
Their only allegiance is to themselves.
Still believe in all that bullshit that holds it together.
I pledge allegiance.
Otherwise, should have done me right. Like this. Hey, look what he done, man! He tried to kill me!
Somebody's got to stop this insanity.
Well, you simply cannot afford to fail this class. Now, what is the answer? Ah! I am the future. I am the future. I am the future.
But you've taught before and nothing like this has ever happened.
All right, I got to deal with it.
Who's going to protect you?
You're getting more teacher.
I'm gonna play some more later.
He's one man trained to deal with students, but they've pushed him to the limit. They've gone too far. Now he's going to give the class of 1984 the lesson they deserve. Class of 1984. Is this the future?
Take a look at my face. I belong to the future. And the world belongs to me. Take a look at my face.
Okay, do you have a synopsis for us, Chris?
I do. This is a brief one. A new teacher at a troubled inner city high school soon ends up clashing with a delinquent leader of a punk posse that runs the school.
Yeah, that is short and sweet.
That is short and
Okay,
sweet.
well, yeah.
Neither of us had seen this, but you go ahead.
Sure. So, okay. I think I watched the trailer and I thought it was going to be trashier than it was. Like it was actually a movie. Not that it's perfect, but I thought it was going to be laughably bad. And there's certainly some stuff to laugh at in it, but it kind of popped right along. So just to unpack that bare bones synopsis a little bit. It starts with the title card that I don't remember verbatim, but it's a long read and it's on screen for a long time. It's basically about, oh, this is based on, true events. And do you remember it? It's like, fortunately.
Yeah. So it was, I made some notes for this one. So it was something like, this is Lincoln High School. So my note was ominous opening titles about violence in schools. It said, this is based on a true story. It was Lincoln High School. And it said something like, unfortunately, this is based on a true story. Fortunately, all schools are not like this yet. So it was like predicting that just every school was going to be. And this is something that, well, I'll talk about that when I get to my part, but go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, so it sets the tone with the sort of like ominous, but also preachy, and and so we open on a montage of just student mayhem. Like, it's a nice school. It's We went to high school. Well, you didn't go to high school, but Parkersburg High School, where we grew up, is.
I didn't go to high school.
You didn't go to high school. Full stop. You grew up in the town where it was.
Yeah.
They don't make buildings like that anymore. It's big, beautiful. Anyway, this high school looks like a perfectly nice high school. I guess it's supposed to be in LA. I don't know where Lincoln High School is.
Oh, I thought it was New York.
I wouldn't know where in New York that was. They don't have high schools like that in New York City.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be New York, but
somewhere.
Maybe it was LA. I don't know.
So
nondescript.
It looks like they shot it in a pretty nice, or a Chicago suburb, a pretty nice high school, actually, but they've graffitied everywhere. And there's this montage of kids just dealing drugs and making out and vandalizing cars and knifing each other. And, it's, you're like, oh my God, what is going on at this place? But then the teachers all show up, and the teachers are wearing blazers and ties, and you're kind of like, so right from the get-go, something doesn't square in terms of, it seems like, for the most part, it's a pretty typical 80s high school where people are mostly white, mostly clean cut, mostly relatively affluent, collar shirts and jeans that aren't all ripped up. But then there are these little clusters of people that are like troublemakers, like gangs, I guess, that are dealing or acting like bullies or something, but they seem to sort of stick out, and the teachers are walking around ignoring it. Roddy McDowell is one of the teachers, and the new guy comes in and bumps into Roddy McDowell on their way in, and Roddy McDowell's got a gun in his briefcase.
He's like, what's the gun for?
Yeah, and Roddy McDowell's like, oh, you got to
Ferry
watch.
King is the new guy.
Okay, you got to watch your back. You don't let these kids. And then some shenanigans go down, and the new teacher is like, hey, that guy got a knife or on the metal detector or something like that. And sorry, I just said his name. Roddy McDowell's like, oh, you got to learn to look the other way, man. You know. Mm-hmm. And so right from the beginning, you're like, what is happening at this school? And there's several times throughout, he goes to his first class. I'm getting ahead of myself. Goes to his first class. There are some real rabble rousers in his first class. Like, everyone's sort of sitting there talking, but there's 4 or 5 kids that are just raising hell. And it turns out that none of them are actually in the class except this one kid. And they're all just his goonies. And he turns out to be the antagonist of the movie. He's the bad guy, the bad kid.
Really bad.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later on, but
yeah, we'll get there. But right from the get-go, he's like, I'm going to call attendance. The kids, I'm going to call attendance. I mean, they're really aggressive and in his face about their contempt for school. I had the thought several times, especially early on in this movie. I'm like, why are you kids even here? Like, you're never in class. You're always out in the hallway.
That was a question.
Doing drugs or dealing drugs in the bathroom, and nobody's like, why do you come to school?
So let's address that. While you brought it up, let's address that for a second. So I think it's Timothy Van Patten is his name. Yeah, Timothy Van Patten is the actor who plays the leader of this gang.
And he looks like a Timothy Van Patten, right? I mean, I think if you picture in your mind a Timothy Van Patten, and this kid, yeah.
What the funny thing was to me about him was he was this preppy looking kid.
Yeah.
But he's the leader of this gang. And there's one point in the movie where he says, we're making $4,000 a week dealing drugs. And so I looked up the inflation calculator. In today's dollars, that's more than $11,000 a week. So they would be doing $500,000 a year selling drugs. Why are they going to school?
Exactly.
They don't have to be in school. They could wait until after school or before school or whatever to sell drugs to the kids. So, and I don't like to nitpick movies. I mean, and now I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I'm going to nitpick this, but they're not even 18. and they are dealing drugs. And later on, we find out, I guess they're doing a prostitution ring. They would be dead in a week. Real drug dealers or the mob or something would come in and murder them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
This is this high school. These high school hoodlums could only exist in this capacity in a world where
they're
there
doing
was no
$500,000 a year in drugs.
Well, so the implication is, and the cops know about it. So the guy eventually he continues to have run-ins with this one bad seed, and it becomes personal pretty quickly, and escalates. And eventually, he ends up in the police precinct because one thing leads to another. And after a series of direct provocations by this kid, he pops him in the face, punches him in the nose. And then, of course, security runs in and there's the kid with a bloody nose. And he turns on the time. He's like, oh, look what he did to me. I was just trying to be a
that was where the kid, though, he like.
Well, he does that later.
Face into the mirror. Oh, okay,
he does that later.
The
first time, security kind of comes into the bathroom right at the moment after that. And I don't remember what he does to provoke him, but it is pointed. I mean, it's not okay for a teacher to hit a kid. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying watching this movie, this little kid, at one point, he refers to him as a psychopath. And then you start by the end of the movie, you're kind of like, okay.
He's a psychopath.
Yeah, he is. He turns on the dime. He's actually a pretty affluent kid. We see him at home with his single mom. They live in a really nice apartment. His mother doesn't hold him accountable to anything. We see him play piano. He is, and this is, I like the little nice touch. They found an actor that actually plays the piano. So he's playing the piano, and he's a beautiful pianist. So, there's this little subplot kind of thing that never gets developed that sort of implies like this kid's looking for a father figure, some deep part of him, or he really just does want to be accepted. But what we learn for sure is, and what the music teacher sees is, this kid is incredibly smart and incredibly gifted. And by the end, you're like, oh, he is. He's a psychopath. He has no empathy. He feels no sense of accountability. There's definitely a sadistic twist to him, which isn't necessarily a hallmark of psychopathy, but it can go hand in hand with it. And he just, once he latches onto this teacher in a negative way, it just becomes this sort of mission to destroy his life. I forget what started me down that road. What were we talking about right before I went blabbing on and on about the kid?
I'm not sure.
I don't know either. Anyway, yeah, you're right. I think that if they were dealing drugs to that kind of volume, I mean, maybe the only place that an outside drug dealer wouldn't get him was in the school. Like maybe they came to school because that's the only market they could survive in, basically.
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh, well, at least one of the thoughts I had related to this kid was, but he's got this gang he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. There's 3 guys and a girl that run around with him. Classmates of his.
Yeah, there's the big guy who looks like he's 40, and then there's 2 other guys and a girl. Yeah,
there's a junkie and a kind of a greaser, a guy who wears a lot of leather, and then a girl, and it's that pack of 5 kids. And I thought, okay, so the ringleader is a psychopath, and he's a charismatic psychopath, and the other kids are kind of, but by the end of it, they are so into him. Like, are they all supposed to be psychopaths? Because they literally commit their lives to following this kid. And you think, I don't know. I think even a really troubled 17-year-old kid at a certain point would balk at some of the stuff they do in this movie. I mean, it's like a peck and paw movie. Have you ever seen Straw Dogs?
I have, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like Straw Dogs in high school. It's, they come by his house and they squirt him with blood or something like that, movie Blood or something, and then they put a Molotov cocktail in his car, and then they break into his house and they rape his wife.
So as soon as you
take pictures of it and then send that to him, this is the lead up to the finale of the thing. You're just like, what is happening?
So 2 things in the movie that were really telegraphed is, as soon as the wife mentions that she's pregnant, I thought they were going to kill the wife. I didn't think they would rape her. I thought they were just going and kill her. But you knew something terrible would happen to her. And then Roddy McDowell is a biology teacher, and he has rabbits. And it's like, well, the rabbits are going to get killed, so they go in and kill the rabbits. But so
they skin them and they kind of festoon.
Yeah, and they put them on a spit almost, and they smear blood everywhere. So these are really sadistic, kids. Another nitpick that I had was when the first day of school, or the first day that the teacher goes into school, and Roddy McDowell has his briefcase, and he has a handgun in it. And he's like, hey, what's the handgun for? And he tells him, and then he goes in and talks to the principal and everything. And I thought, okay, so this guy came from Nebraska and went to wherever it is, LA or New York or Chicago or whatever, and did not ask anybody about this school, did not visit the school. He's just totally unaware that this is this horrible school.
Right. And it's 1984. So it's not like they had video Zoom interviews. Like, he wrote a couple of letters back and forth and took the job on the spot like he did.
Yeah. I mean, he would have called somebody.
Incomprehensible to me.
Or whatever. Yeah. But so this movie, and this is, I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but because when this movie came out, we would have been like 8 years old or something like that. But I can remember, so this plays into a couple of tropes of the era. So one is, I don't know if you remember this or not, but this was a big thing, as I remember, kind of in the media and in the news. Oh, there are schools where they have metal detectors, and they're like prisons, and the kids go in and they're going to stab the teachers and all this kind of stuff. So it plays into that. It also plays into a favorite trope of action movies. And we've covered one or two of these, where you have the cop who, you have all these horrible criminals, but the cop's hands are tied because the bleeding hearts won't let them beat up the criminals and all that stuff.
Right.
So this movie very much falls into that. Perry King, the principal won't let him do anything. It's like he holds the teachers more accountable than he does these terrible kids. He goes to the police, and the police are like, we can't do anything. They're underage. So those were
right. So if you're not 18, you just get a free pass.
You can just murder people and rape people.
You can deal drugs. Break into the biology classroom and literally mutilate. I mean, dozens of animals, and it was an upsetting. I mean, that's an upsetting crime scene, not just because it killed a bunch of animals, but they Hannibal Lectered them, like they hung the skins and cut off heads, and it was really upsetting. And you think, well, what are you going to do? They're not 18, so there's literally nothing. There's no suspension. There was no repercussions whatsoever. But he just sort of shrugs and like, okay, well, call the janitor if you need help cleaning this all up. It was flabbergasting.
Yeah,
and I guess the movie's positing that things have gotten so bad in this school that nothing can be done about these horrible kids. Which throughout the movie is confusing, because like it says, fortunately, things aren't like everywhere isn't like this yet. And you're like, well, this place doesn't feel quite realistic. Like, once he sort of gets the bad kids out of his band class, the band is really good. Like, this is maybe 1% of the school are these troublemakers, and the other 99% are so kowtowed. That's not the right term, but they're so browbeaten down by the bad seed in this school that they can't get any learning done. And if you could just suppress the bad guys, then we'd all be this wonderful school with wonderful kids.
Right.
Like, it's at a certain point, the other kids aren't going to rise up, like in a school where anything goes. It's almost like the rules and the law protect the bad kids, even from the other kids. Like, nobody would stand up to these kids. Come on.
And again, I think was kind of a trope of 80s films is like, we're just powerless to do anything against because the system won't let us do anything, you know? And you talked about with Timothy Van Patten's character, there needed to be another scene or two. So they show him, he's the only kid that you ever see any home life of.
Right.
And like you said, he lives this pretty affluent life. His mother is obviously in denial about, they talk about how many times he's been suspended and everything. But it would have been nice to had a scene or two where we get some idea as to why he's like this. Why is this kid so evil? But it's very the film is very black and white in that he's pretty much, him and his gang are pretty much pure evil, and Perry King, the teacher, is pretty much pure good.
Right. Although his pregnant wife begs him after, there's several back and forth incidents where this escalates. And they have conversations like, why are we still here? Like, let's go back to my mother's house. Like, we're going to have a baby. I think
that's that he's this hero that...
And he's like, no, I'm not a quitter. I'm not...
He has an obligation to help these kids, Well,
he's like, I'm a teacher. I have to teach. And you're like, go teach somewhere else. Like, again and again,
go back to Nebraska.
This school illustrates that it's not interested in doing anything in its own self-interest to protect itself.
No. I suppose we have this very weak, ineffectual principal who doesn't want to do anything. He views all the kids as animals. And like you said, that's like they're 95, 90%, 99% good, but he just views them all as
Michael J. Fox.
Worthless. Oh, yeah. We didn't even talk about Michael J. Fox.
Baby.
So we have
just Michael Fox in this film. No, there's no J even. And he is probably 17. He's probably the age in the...
I believe this is his first film. So I think this was pre or just right around the time when he would have started Family Ties. But it's funny because he's kind of chubby and he has this really terrible hairdo.
He's adorable.
You watch it and you're just like, wow, it's kind of amazing that this guy went on to be this gigantic superstar. Not that he's bad in the film.
Yeah. No, I think he looks perfect. He's a band kid. He's a kid in band class that's passionate about it. And he's kind of a wiseacre in a classic 80s way, but in a lovable way. Like, he's not challenging authority. He's just got a pocket full of comebacks, and that seemed quaint compared to the psychos. But he's the class clown. He gets a bunch of laughs. And I looked at him and I'm like, oh yeah, I could see it. Like, the camera loves him. It's Michael J. Fox. Who doesn't, and he went on to play basically the lovable kid or some version of that. Like, he's just had a young face, even into his middle years. How old was he when he did Back to the Future? He had to be older than high school by then, 20s.
Yeah, right. He was probably in his 20s.
Still playing a high school student. Anyway, I really enjoyed seeing him in this, and
it was neat to see him early on,
bit parts that people hand in good performances. I really thought, watching the trailer for this, and that I'd never heard of it, that it was just going to be absolute garbage. And we've been picking it apart. I don't think it stands up as a plausible... It's
very much a time capsule.
Yeah, as a plausible thing, but as a time capsule, and I think it clips right along. So things come to a head. They assault his wife. I was sure that there was going to be something where they say that she lost the baby, because why do you establish that she's pregnant
I was certain that was going to happen. Yeah.
Assault her, and then, but so on the night of his big concert, they break in, they assault the wife. The girl, who is sort of sexual sadist, takes a Polaroid of them doing it and puts it in an envelope and they go to the school, and she has, just before they're about to, the band leaders, the teacher's conducting. So just before they're supposed to start, she gives one of the ushers an envelope, and he runs it up and he says, "Oh, a girl back there just asked me to give you this." And he opens it up and takes the Polaroid of his wife being attacked out, and then he turns and she's in the back being like, nah. And so he's enraged and he flies off the handle, and he goes running out after her. And of course it's a trap. So she leads him into the rest of the school is pitch black except for some red mood lighting. I mean, it's like
the red mood lighting was cool.
Cavernous school where literally nobody else is, and they lie in wait for him and spray him with they're kind of toying with him. They hit him with pipes and they hurt him, but they don't kill him. It wasn't clear to me what
there's something where they say they were going to play with him.
Yeah,
because the big guy who looks like he's 40 is kicking him and beating him, and one of the other guys says, no, don't do too much, we're going to play with him a while.
Yeah, but I guess the end game was ultimately they were going to kill him. I mean, that was sort of the implication,
I guess. Yeah. But they got to play with him first.
And eventually he gets them to separate. I don't remember how he turns, where he stops chasing them and
he gets away somehow. And so the main guy takes the wife up to the roof, and then the other,
they actually have her hostage. I forgot that. They still got her.
Yeah.
And then so the other people are messing. At some point they go from chasing him to looking for him.
Yeah.
And they make that wonderful choice that we see in so many movies. Let's split up. Right? There's 4 of them and 1 of him, and they decide to split up. So one by one, he takes them out. And
before that, I was thinking, so this is more or less an exploitation movie. And right before that, I was thinking, this for an exploitation film. So we had a scene early on where they go to there's like a punk club that they hang out. That was another trope of the 80s, is people were really scared of punk rock, basically. So any kids that listen to punk music were automatically bad and dangerous. So they go to a punk club, and that's where they do their business. And they have a girl who comes in, and she, I guess, is addicted to whatever drugs they're selling. At one point, there's a kid in the high school that they're selling angel dust to him. And it's like, you never hear about angel dust anymore, but I can remember being in elementary school and being afraid of, like, oh my God, I hope I never come across angel dust. I don't know if anybody uses that.
So he gets a little bag and he pours it in his palm, and he just snorts it all up, and then he goes bonkers and climbs up the flagpole
and falls
off,
dies,
and everybody comes.
So that was another trope of the 80s, is angel dust is something to be really scared of.
Right. You'll want to go really high, and you'll think you can fly.
Yeah. So I don't know what else they were dealing, but that was one of the things. So this girl is, I guess she's addicted to whatever they're selling, and she doesn't have the money for it. So she now has to she has to be a prostitute for them.
Well, they sort of pitched it like she already was one.
Already was a prostitute. Yeah, a little bit.
Like that was the selling thing.
But it's like, okay, you have to try out or whatever. So she strips down. She's, it's full frontal nudity. So that was a big exploitation thing. And then, but as the movie was going along, I was thinking, this, for an exploitation movie, this hasn't been all that violent. There hasn't really been a lot of blood or anything. But we have the scene where the wife is raped, which is really disturbing, even 40 years later or whatever. And then he dispatches of these thugs. And the first one, they have a battle like in the shop and over a table saw. And a circular saw rather, and he cuts the guy's arm off and then throws it on him. So then he hear
the saw grinding, like basically he throws him on it, so it's on his spine, and you hear the engine of the saw like grinding down. It goes on and on. You're like, That's a cheap way to do so, but it was like, it's pretty gross.
It's pretty gross. And up till then, I was thinking like this is like half exploitation movie, half after school special. But like it makes a big turn at the end where it gets
Full
pretty
exploitation.
serious.
Yeah.
But he kills another one of the guys, and this I laughed out loud at this. I've got to look up this line because I forget exactly what the guy says. So there's another guy where he pours gasoline all over the floor and sets the guy on fire. And as the guy is burning, he says, "Fuck you in hell." The teacher, which I thought was a great line. I've never heard anybody ever say that before.
Even while burning alive. See, that's the thing, is that these kids hate him so much. The other thing that
and they're
jarred
so
with me is,
evil.
so the big guy and the girl, I guess the other three come in and find, with some of them come in and find the first guy on the bandsaw, and they are heartbroken and furious. They're like, "Oh no, and we will avenge you." And you're kind of like, you don't really care about each other. You know, it's like if Wyatt Earp came in and saw somebody had shot his brother, you know, that was the kind of response of like that kind of grief. It's just, you kids don't care about each other in that way. You're all evil together. That's all that there is. And then when he's burning to death, he curses him, not just screaming, "Oh, put it out." These are 17-year-old kids. It's like they're demons or something. There's no other depth.
The kid would have been crying. And,
one's a junkie,
like,
one's a heavy, one's a right. It's just they're these different colored M&M characters. There's nothing to them.
The only time that they ever seemed human in the movie. So there's a scene after. So Roddy McDowell, and I would say Roddy McDowell, I think every movie that he's ever been in, he made better. Roddy McDowell is really great, and he's great in this. But he is this bitter teacher who it's like he's like the principal. He views all of these kids as just animals. And he feels that he's never gotten through to any of them. He teaches biology.
Still shows up and does it. He
shows up and does it, but he drinks while he's at work. All this,
and he has a gun.
The only time that the kids seem human is after they kill all of his animals. There's a scene where he's in class and he has his handgun and he's forcing all of them to answer questions at gunpoint.
He snaps.
And all of the gang members are in the class and they're terrified because they think he's going to shoot them. And that's the only time in the movie where they don't seem like cartoon characters. They actually seem human, like kids, basically, because they're scared,
But they're not scared. One of them gets burned alive and he doesn't ever seem scared.
Right. Yeah.
Very inconsistent. So anyway, it's he picks them off one at a time. Does he kill the girl or does she get away? Oh, she's in a car.
She tries to run him over, but there's like a car in the not the shop class, but whatever, the auto body class or whatever. So she tries to run him over and she actually kills the 40-year-old guy in the process, the heavy, and like another car falls on top of her car and she's not dead, but she's dying. And the teacher says, where is he? The leader with his wife, where is he? And she doesn't want to tell him, but she says he's on the roof, so you don't know if you presume that she probably dies, but you don't really know. But she's the only one that has a little bit of redeeming quality because she at least tells him, she doesn't tell him to go to hell as she's dying in the car.
I wanted to see her die.
Yeah. You want to see all of them die. I mean, it's very satisfying that they do die. You're clearly on his side.
So he goes up to the roof and there's a struggle. And the kid ends up falling backwards through one of those windows, skylight windows in the top of a building. And it's above the stage. So there's sort of two panes. Like the stage has a skylight above it, high above it. And then there's some sort of, architectural fly space. And then there is the sort of top level skylight window above that. So he falls through there and is clinging to a bunch of ropes that exist for some reason.
Yeah, there's ropes there for some reason. Yeah.
But the people down below where the orchestra is happening are not aware of what's going on yet. And they have one of these classic 80 moments of like, he's like, oh, wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean any of it.
I'm just
Don't let me die. I'm just a kid. Right. Which seems totally implausible after everything that has happened in this movie. But the teacher's like, oh, he's right. I've got to help him. So he reaches down to help him.
He's pure good and the kid is pure evil.
And it's the scorpion and the frog. And then so as soon as he gets his hand, the kid's tries to knife him or something. And in doing so, falls.
As you're
death.
hanging on for dear life, you would slash the person who's trying to help you. Right.
Right. Rather than say, let him pull you all the way up and then get him on the roof when you were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he falls and it's very Die Hard. He sort of crashes through the light. And I don't think he hits the stage. I think he's the idea is that the rope is kind of wrapped around his neck and he's hanged.
Yeah, he's hanging in there, which is pretty good scene.
In front of the orchestra and all of the people who came. The turnout for this student orchestra, packed house.
Massive, yeah.
1,000-seat school amphitheater and literally not an empty seat in the house to hear them do like the 1812 overture or something.
The parents prior to this have probably never cared about anything that went on, and they're probably just like, this is just a waste of time.
This is the school that everyone's abandoned. It's just like, what are you going to do with these kids? They're all no good.
They're animals.
Incidentally, just going back to the beginning, the drugs, all of the stuff, none of the parents are getting involved, right?
Mm.
There's just none of these people who show up for this have any stakes in the place where their kids spend 6 to 8 hours a day. Every single day. Right?
And if we look at today's society, we have all these people showing up at school board meetings and all this kind of stuff, and they wouldn't have been showing up when like kids are getting stabbed and they're dealing angel dust and there's prostitution.
What are you going to do? They're juveniles. Kids will be kids. What are you going to do? What can be done? So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Would you recommend this?
I mean, I kind of liked it. I mean, it's not a poorly made film. Again, it's clearly exploitation. There's definitely some very exploitative things in it, but the acting is good. It's shot well. It's not a bad movie. I think there are definitely some things that you'd laugh at about it, and we're 40 years later. I don't have kids, but you lived in New York for a long time and have children. Like, do schools like this exist? Is this a thing? Have we become we have school shootings today, which are obviously really awful, but I don't think this prophecy of this movie has come about, that it's just like we have all these schools where it's just rampant violence and crime.
Well, I used to do in school work.
Mm-hmm.
And there are definitely schools in the inner city with metal detectors.
Sure.
And, that's basically because kids would bring a weapon to school, a knife. Guns, a little less common, but, in the city, you've got, there's a lot of things contributing to that. Like there is a lack of funding, right? Is a huge part of it. There's just a lack of funding. And
Sure.
what appropriate funding would do is help do better training for teachers, help pay for better security, better trained security, and more security in the schools, and outreach programs. Because there's a lot of the most troubled kids, I think wouldn't come as a surprise, come from broken homes.
Sure.
So they're where they go after school is rough.
Mhm.
And that's how they learn to be rough. And maybe don't learn to be any other way. And then so of course, this troubled kid who's probably not a cartoon psychopath just comes to school with a lot of problems and maybe not a great attitude and maybe a weapon, because maybe they are involved in drugs. And the bottom line is, if there's a weapon in school, someone's going to get hurt at the end,
Sure.
sooner or later. So they've got metal detectors to try and prevent it. And
Your
fights
time
break
was
out.
going.
But I've never been in a school where it was just a zoo like this. Like,
Yeah,
it
I was gonna say,
just a
did you
zoo
go to
that all the animals were loose in the building, fighting and screaming and clawing, and nobody was doing anything about it.
Did you go to schools that were just all the walls were covered in graffiti? And I mean,
No.
yeah.
I mean, I think that you'd see graffiti. The whole neighborhoods would be graffitied. And so there would be some tags and stuff in school, but the school you just got to clean that up. You
Sure.
you don't leave it.
Yeah. So what did you think? Would you recommend this?
I mean, I think I could recommend it as an exploitation movie if you're into
Sure.
that, especially if you're into the kind of time capsule of it.
Mhm.
Because something about was very formative time of our life, those early 80s. And you and I as kids, Star Wars kids, basically would be like, oh, is that what high school is like? Like, it might have all seemed very scary and glamorous and grown up to us.
And high school for us was not like this. And I imagine
No.
for most people in the United States, it was not like this.
No, and I remember when I was in junior high and high school, there were people who would bully each other, and there were fist fights that would occasionally happen when, kids got angry at each other, but they were always quickly broken up, and it was,
And maybe I was sheltered or naive or whatever, but I didn't see drugs ever in high school. Any drugs.
No, although sadly, like, it's become a thing in our town, our hometown.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Meth
Meth
right.
and opioids, which is true of so many places. So I think that has, you don't see it in the halls of the high school, but I think that it has seeped into that demographic, and it is affecting the kids.
Right. I mean, kids would fight. I think that happens in every school.
Yeah, after the football game or whatever. Yeah,
there would be fights, but I never saw anybody get stabbed or
right,
or any of that kind of thing.
No, it was a lot of bravado and some fisticuffs in a small town kind of way every once in a while, but not like this. I found this singularly implausible, and I really made me want to know what the true story was. Like, it's based on a true story. What, a teacher had a gun in school, or that there were metal detectors in schools? Like, I felt like
this was a true story in the way that I always think of early 90s films that are about the internet, especially the kind of more horror sci-fi movies that are about the internet, that they always feel like it's somebody who had never actually used the internet. They just heard of it, and they're just like, oh, I've heard of this thing. And then they just made up a story about it. Right. I imagine this was very, very loosely based on the truth, that there was probably something, again, I can remember as a kid, this being a narrative that, like, oh, all these schools have metal detectors and everything. And I'm sure there was some minor thing that happened, and they just ran with it. And it's like, hey, let's have these kids selling drugs and running prostitution rings and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would put a disclaimer on this that, early on, it seems kind of benign and sort of silly and funny almost to a degree, but you do have some pretty disturbing stuff in this later on.
Yeah, I wouldn't watch it with your kids. The rape was really upsetting to me.
Yeah, that was very upsetting.
And
I was glad that the wife didn't die, but
it's upsetting conceptually. It's not particularly graphically shot, but they do depict the scene.
Yes.
He reminded me of the Clockwork Orange, although that one left scars on me because I saw that when I was younger, and that
definitely
was really
felt
upsetting.
Clockwork Orange came to mind watching this, and I think they were echoing that, for sure. But overall, it's like I say, Perry King was a guy that I always liked. I mean, I don't know if younger people probably have no conception of who he is at all, but he did a lot of TV stuff during this time, and I always liked him. Him and Bruce Boxleitner are almost like the same guy. But again, it's well shot and it's well acted and pretty effective. There's definitely some things that modern audiences would laugh at now watching this, but overall, I would recommend it.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, yes, I would with some asterisks, and you've pretty much outlined the same asterisks. So. Yeah. What do you want to do for next time? What were we going to do that we decided to bump?
So we talked about, there's an Australian movie from the same year. No, this was 1982, even though it's about 1980. It's the class of 1984. But there's a 1984 Australian film called Razorback about a big killer pig. Boar that looks pretty good. So I think you want to go ahead and do that one?
Sure. Let's do Razorback.
Okay.
I mean, that looks like right square in our strike zone.
Yeah, right in our wheelhouse.
So
I've never seen it. So
I haven't either. I had never heard of it before you sent me the link to it. So Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. Obviously, we got the video up here on YouTube. We got our own channel. We're on Facebook now, but I think that might still just be audio. I don't know how Facebook is handling.
No, I've been posting the YouTube videos to Facebook.
Oh, great.
As well.
Okay, so
Instagram, Twitter.
Yep. If you're into watching us talk about movies, then you can now start to check out our video feeds. And if you are not into watching us, well, you can still listen to the audio on all the same usual places, Apple and etc. You know how podcasts work. Send us an email, tweet us a tweet, whatever you decide to do. It is very nice for us to have.
If you are
your feedback.
If you are, I can't think of what his name is.
Yeah, I can't think of I don't know who you're talking about. Christoph
sounded
Waltz.
Very much like not Christoph Waltz. Shoot. The Mandalorian is not the thing that he would be most known for, but what's his name?
Werner Herzog.
Werner Herzog. Yeah, I was thinking Werner Herzog.
Werner Herzog.
Which is amazing that they got him to
acting now. That's so
got him
crazy
to do The Mandalorian. I think it's just crazy, but
yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for joining us. Any final words, Mr. Huddleston?
Nope, I think that's it.
Great. Then we will talk to you next week.